Can you tell what's wrong with this? Well, I can. Whoever did this should be fired. Hi, I'm Joe, and welcome to MotorCity Boat Works. Let's get to work. Today in the Boat Works, we've got a new project. I'm working on the Helm station for the Albin 27 pocket trawler. Because I tore out the bathroom and the closet area in the forward cabin of my Albin 27, well, there is no dead space behind the bulkhead that you see at the Helm station. If you were to install any instruments into the dash of the Helm, well, they would be inside the shower area. That's the purpose of the Helm pod. It holds the chart plotter, the radar display, all of that right there at the Helm. This right here is an instrument pod. It goes on the bulkhead at the helm of the Albin 27 steering station, right? And there are going to be two electronic instruments there. One of them is the Garmin depth sounder. One of them is going to be the new Simrad radar chart plotter. They go inside this box, but when I made this box 10 years ago or whenever I made it, I didn't make it the correct size because I didn't know what size the instruments were that I was going to be putting in there. I tried to do it to some general dimensions that I researched on the internet, but of course I didn't necessarily get it right. So once again, something that you find on paper doesn't really match the reality, or things change over time and your best plans kind of go out the windows. The problem is that this box is not deep enough to hold these instruments. There has to be a certain amount of depth for the wiring and what have you behind here. So I've got to create a new one of these boxes. Well, there's another problem also. The box is actually too wide because the throttle, the engine controls are actually over here. They require a certain amount of room to be able to actuate. And with the box in the way, well, they hit against there. The throttle and the transmission shifter won't fit. So the box has to be shorter and it has to be deeper. Now, I bought a new controller for the throttle and the gear shifter. It's something very similar to what we used on the boat when we were in the Netherlands cruising. I thought I would install this in place of the old Morse controls. I realized that the handle is too long on this new shifter. I briefly explored trying to cut the handle down, but that would entail having to rethread the end of the shifter itself, and getting a new throttle cap to fit on there, well, it just seemed like a lot of work. So I ended up sticking with the original Morse controls from the Albin 27. I restored these a number of years ago, kind of cleaned and polished them up. They're very high quality. While these shifters are available today, they're not built to this level of quality. These are very heavy duty and really kind of nice if you can get them to polish up. What I really want to do is come up with kind of a different shape, because I would like these instruments tilted. Normally, the box is set up to be flush like this, but I really want them like this, because when you're sitting in the helm chair, you want the screen to be facing you, and when you're standing, you want the screen to be facing you. Since it's going to be down low, you don't want it to be flush because you won't be able to see the screen. So this is, I'm designing something new here. All right, so that brings us around to the massive work table here. We got like 8 projects going at once. I'm doing some fabrication here, cardboard pattern making, and I'm thinking that the side dimension of this pod is going to look like this. I'll get it together here and you can take a look at the pattern and we'll see if this is going to work. Now I make my measurements and my sketches and my parts list available to the workers. All you have to do is go over to Patreon, sign up. Even if you can't support the channel right now, sign up as a free worker, because sometimes I give away free information. When I do one of these projects, it probably looks like a magical process going from some sort of sketch on a napkin to something that you end up building out of cardboard and then foam board or fiberglass. But in reality, this is a skill set that you need to learn if you're going to be doing any sort of boat restoration. There's lots of complex curves and angles, and you're going to have to fabricate things, so the more you do it, the better you get. get at it. And over time, you'll find that you develop your own process. You'll really get quite good at it, and you'll be surprised what you can create just by dreaming it up. There's a lot of dimensions competing between the depth that the instruments require and how far this thing sticks out, over the engine control panel. That's kind of a delicate balance. Yeah, this is not working. This was my off-the-cuff plan here. Obviously, this is not working. But after 3 different versions, I finally came up with the one that I think fits, and it's going to work pretty well. You could build this project out of some teak plywood or something like that, but I really like the way that the PVC foam board looks once it's all finished out with rounded corners and trimmed with a little bit of teak trim work. I've done several episodes about various PVC foam board projects. If you're interested in this topic, be sure to check that out. I talk about where to get the material and how you do my assembly process. I call the process the screw and glue method. The pieces of PVC foam board are screwed together using drywall screws, and epoxy is used to glue the joints along with some fiberglass tape. There's several steps involved, but I've never been disappointed with the results. All right, so this is one of those things that I want to show you. So you would think, hey, how come you can't get the boat together faster? How come things, you're not moving at a faster pace? And it really has to do with kind of the custom bespoke fitting of every single item or modification that I'm doing to the boat, because you would think that things are symmetrical or that they look the same, symmetrical to the eye, but in reality they're not. Because on a boat, everything is, kind of like a custom car. Everything's a little bit different from one side to the other, fore to aft. So here's a great example. I want to show you this. Check this out. So right here, this is the helm station of the boat, right? And previously I had a box right here that the instruments were going to go in. Of course, it's not deep enough. So I've got to make a new box, which is this one up here, and that will go inside here. Also, when I made the first box, it went over too far and it blocked the engine controls. So we got to make the box shorter. It's got to go to here. But you would look at this with your naked eye and you would think that it looks pretty symmetrical. So when you do your measurements, you make your box, but guess what? It's not actually symmetrical. So you come over here, and this right here is about 8.5 inches. This side over here, well, this is 8 inches. And when you have a complex shape, like this thing right here, well, now you have to get into making sure that one side is a 1/2 inch shorter than the other side, but it still has to meet the top part here in the same place. So that's what I've been messing with here. And so we've got it like this. All right, it's looking pretty good. Very good, right? It's also got a slight angle. I don't know if you can tell, but this distance right here and this distance down here, well, the bottom is about 1/4 out. A little more, just to put this whole panel piece here at a slight angle facing up. And this will be appropriate when you're sitting in the chair, the helm chair. It will be all proper, and of course standing up too. So I think it's going to work. It's just tedious and kind of exhausting, because you end up making mistakes. You end up going through material. Sometimes I have a limited amount of material. Like I only have so much of this PVC foam board in the shop before I have to order another entire full sheet. And so you're trying to make do with the scraps, trying to cut through what we've got. I had to do parts of this pattern here twice, and it just eats up my stock. And because we know we have other projects down the road that we also have to use the PVC foam board, we're trying to get away with using every scrap that we have, and it can just be very frustrating. So we got this done. Now we've got to cut a piece to cover the panel here, and I think we're good to go. People often ask me why I don't use more teak plywood or pieces of mahogany, and there's a couple reasons. All that beautiful wood adds an extra component of maintenance to your boat. It makes the boat a lot darker in terms of lighting and its kind of tone. You can get a really classic look just using small pieces of teak trim. It's lighter, it's waterproof. The PVC foam board has the advantage when you round over the edges and then fair sand and paint, you can get a finish that looks very close to molded fiberglass. And while it seems like there's a lot of steps, it's actually less work than if you were messing around with a piece of teak plywood. You can't just put these electrical nav instruments inside a box. They warm up over time, they generate heat. So there has to be some sort of ventilation in the nav pod itself. In my original design, I drilled some holes, tried to make it look uniform, but I really wasn't happy with it. Well, now I've come up with some small stainless steel vents. All right, so we got a couple of these. These are like little vents, jobbers here. See what they look like. And what we're going to do is we drill a hole here in the bottom, and then this pops right inside there. Look at that. It's a nice little vent. A little bit of work and we got this thing done. I think it looks pretty good, and you can see what the layout is. Check this out. These two gauges right here, these are relatively flat gauges. One's a rudder indicator, one's a fuel gauge. The joystick sticks up, so this has got to be in this position, and this is the approximate dimensions of the beta panel. So I think what we need to do is move this over, even just a half an inch would give us a little bit more room. And then ultimately what we'll do, we'll have this acrylic panel on here, which everything will kind of mount to. On an old boat, there might be all sorts of holes in the dash, which means putting in your new instruments and what have you, well, everything's kind of messed up, so you need a uniform surface. I like to use black plexiglass or acrylic material. It makes a nice uniform surface, and it's a lot less work than trying to fill in all the fiberglass holes. Look, these go up. Plenty of room. I think this looks good. Top, we'll have the horn. I think VHF is going to go right in here. Maybe some other spots here for lights and what have you go there. Lights and different things, switches. If you're standing right here, you can see that. So we got to plan ahead for finishing. So let's take a moment to look at some of this teak trim. This is maybe a 1/4 inch round over. It's not 1/4 inch round, it's 1/4 inch round over. The profile looks a little bit like that. This is probably 1/4 inch round. That's not bad. This is too big. This is 1/2 inch round. Too beefy. Probably 1/4 inch round, I think looks good. The question is how to, attach that on there. Needs to be glued on there. It's the end of another episode. We got a little bit done here. I'm happy with how this has come out. I want to maybe do some experiments with the trim just to plan ahead for down the road when we get to phase 3 and I got to do all the trim on everything. I want to make sure that this is going to work properly, but I don't know that I have enough of this teak wood to do this particular size. I don't want to put the electronics actually in the box just yet in case something changes down the road. We'll cut the openings for those very, very soon. But for now, we're still kind of messing around with laying everything out. Which goes on what side, I don't know. I want to spend some time thinking about it, but we made some progress. I hope you got something out of this episode. I'm moving at a snail's pace, but Rome wasn't built in a day. We'll get there eventually. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time. Stay motivated. If you like these videos, please hit the subscribe button. These videos would not be possible without your support.